So the DA launched a manifesto over the weekend, and I'm just going to show you one particular policy that exemplifies the entire manifesto. And this is the gun rights policy. Gun rights are very important to us here on Morning Shot. And when you read this policy in front of you, it elucidates exactly what the DA is about. Keep everything roughly the same, just make it a lot more efficient.
Yeah, I mean, this is the biggest problem there, Ramon, is, we've often said this about the DA. For those of you who don't know, DA is basically ANC light. It's like the ANC working properly without some of the communism. I say some of the communism because, unfortunately, it still has some socialist ideas. And a good example of this is like they want to say to you, right-wing talking point is, don't worry, we're not going to take away your firearms for the purpose of self-defense. They go out almost saying like it's a First Amendment right or a Second Amendment right. You should have this. It's important, but the state must still control it. I mean, the state's been the problem on the existing firearms register, but they're like, don't worry, we'll professionalize what the ANC couldn't. Nah, guys, how about just scrap what the ANC did, put a brand new policy in place? Like, we'd like that. But you see, the DA never seems to do that. And this is no more typified than when it comes to the social grants. Because would you know, it's the ANC's key point that they say about the DA all the time is DA will get rid of social grants. It's only the ANC that will give you social grants. So the DA did one better. They said, not only will we not get rid of social grants, but we'll actually increase the numbers.
That is correct. So we'll have more ANC policy, just done better, and i.e. in an inflated welfare state. Because I think at the fundamental end of the day, the DA understands it can't fix the country. Right? Because they say they want to create 2 million jobs, which is not a lot. And therefore, if they can only create 2 million jobs, there's 28 million people on social grants. They're just going to increase the social grants rather than try to reconfigure how to create real jobs for real people. And it feels like the DA, in some sense, doesn't know how to wield power. And this is a constant theme that we keep talking about on this particular channel in terms of what makes you so unique, so great that people will kill for your name. And for the DA, like there's not much there. It's like the ANC did X, we're going to do what the ANC has done, but do it 10 times better. But the only difference is we're going to maybe devolve policing, devolve some other aspects of the state, but fundamentally we're going to keep everything as is and just make it a lot better than before. It's almost like being a CEO of a corporation rather than a president of a country. But it's a different dynamic to be the president. You got so much more leeway to do radical things. But it looks like the DA are not a fan of that at all. Or maybe they just lack the intelligence and strategic insights to be a little bit radical, to be a bit more fun, to be a bit more entertaining and enticing.
Yeah, but we hear you. You guys are just like being really hard on the DA. Like, surely it's not that bad. I'm like, yeah, it is, because the DA is basically saying, for example, child support grant, they want to increase from 510 to 760. That's a big increase. Oh, you know the 350 grant? Yeah, they're going to keep that. They're going to turn it into a job seekers grant. And all you got to do is show that you're actively seeking a job. You know, they have this in the UK, Ramon. You know, they have this thing called job seekers allowance. All you have to do is go to like one interview a week and then like never accept the job, even when it's offered to you, and just say, oh, well, I went to an interview. Yeah, I can see that happening in South Africa. And even more interestingly, I got to wonder where these job interviews are going to happen. I mean, in places like Mthatha, no freaking jobs, mate. So where are you going to go for a job interview? I can't see that going very well. So I can see that it's going to be 350 increase on grant, job seekers allowance, and you should just self-certify, in which case it's just the 350 grant. And you may say to yourself, okay, so what does this mean for the country? Well, the DA has actually said that what this is going to require is another 39 billion that the FSS is going to have to raise in tax for social grants. And they're like, but don't worry, we've got you covered. We're going to create 2 million jobs. Mate, there's like nearly 25 million unemployed people. 2 million is like less than 10%. You know, this is stupid. Do you know why we can't really create the other 25 million jobs? Because we've got no electricity, no trains, and no ports. Probably should have spoken about those, shouldn't we?
I mean, to be fair, they do say they were going to end load shedding and water shedding. They're going to privatize all of that, essentially. They're going to just let the market come in and fix Eskom and fix water and all that sort of stuff, which, I mean, I agree the market is probably better than a government. So it's funny that the DA are quite willing to put Eskom to the market, but not education. For example, in education, they say they're going to strengthen, the metrics used to test teachers on how good they are as teachers, and parents' choice is important, and we're going to make schools better. But they never talk about, how about we just have, like, we totally destroy the Department of Education, and then that money is divided by every pupil in this country that are given 20,000 rand as an education voucher to go to wherever they wish to go for school. Like, that's a radical plan that makes a lot of sense, that will destroy and have a revolution in our education system, keeping the entrenched deep state of SATU and trying to fix it just seems to me like a dying strategy. It's like trying to give a Panado to a cancer patient. South Africa is the cancer patient. The DA wants to give Panado. Sometimes you just have to shoot it in the head, the patient, and make something else come out of that.
Yeah, okay, so let's actually look at this a little bit more logically. You can sit here and say, okay, let's privatize Eskom, let's privatize the ports, let's try privatize the rail. For one, you can't. And the first reason you can't is because we have these wonderful things in South Africa called unions. Maybe you heard about them. They're the guys who go around and burn everything. So every time they don't get the pay rise they want, they just burn shit down. I mean, if you ever seen your local municipality in flames, that's the unions. So you can go try say you're going to privatize whatever you want, but you still got the unions to deal with, and they're going to burn your shit down. You've also got high crime. One of the reasons we can't get the trains back on the railway tracks is because of the trucking mafia and the taxi mafia and the this mafia and the that mafia. And we have a mafia state. So how are you going to tackle that? And you can go to the private investors and say, right, guys, why don't you invest in this stuff? And I'm telling you, Herman, and I think you agree with this. They're going to say, nah, you're right. Like, we'd rather invest in, no word of a lie, a fucking bloody Mozambique, which is a communist shithole. But they'd rather invest in there or in Zimbabwe that has more sanctions up the wazoo than South Africa. But at least they don't have the unions and the mafias in the way that we do. So what the DA should be doing is obviously tackling that industry. But they're not. Because they don't want to disrupt the existing patronage network? Or is it that it's kind of implied that they will, but it's not really in the manifesto for now? I don't know, man. What do you think?
Well, I mean, essentially what you need to know, and this is extremely important, crime causes poverty. Everyone always says poverty causes crime. Absolute bullshit. Crime causes poverty. It prevents people from having their own businesses. It prevents people from safely meeting together to effect trade. It prevents railway lines from being placed. It prevents ports from being fixed. It prevents Eskom from stopping load shedding. Crime is causing all of these problems. The DA solution to crime is to decentralize policing, which is a good idea, and then sort of train people properly and get rid of cadet deployment, all that bullshit. Great. But what you need is a Nayib Bukele iron fist of vengeance on every fucker who is destroying this place. If you arrest without trial 100,000 criminals in this country, the rest is easy. But the DA is not going to do that.
Happen.
The DA is not going to do that. They're going to be like, oh, crime is just one element to fix. Crime is the element to fix. It is the element to fix. And if your crime policy is like, oh, we'll decentralize shit, great. But you're not going to fix the other major problems without solving crime first. You need a Nayib Bukele from El Salvador in this country. You solve crime, miraculously everything else gets better. But you can't solve all these things. You need to solve one thing, and that's crime. And the DA is not doing that in this manifesto.
No, the DA is not doing that, because what the DA doesn't want to be doing is anything that would be considered far right. Because remember, the ANC will sit down and say, look at these radical far right white extremists. And the DA typically wants to go out there and dissuade ANC voters that they're what the ANC tells them that they are. So as a result, they take a negotiated position. They're like, don't worry, we won't get rid of your social grants. ANC lies when they say we'll destroy them. They're the only party that can do that. And don't worry, we won't go out there and immediately tackle all the corruption networks, because obviously you'd be like, I'm not voting for those guys. That would be Maluka disappearing. But the problem is it makes the message fall short, Ramon, because the people of South Africa aren't stupid enough to not know what the faults are. They might vote for their tribal leaders, they might vote on nationalistic lines or racial lines, but they're not dumb enough not to know what the problems are, man. So by the DA kind of ignoring the problems and just kind of giving a watered down approach, makes me kind of think to myself, well, even if we did get to the DA, would it really be that much difference, or are we just going to get a lighter version of the ANC? And this has actually been a lot of people's comments for a very long time, which is why the inability for South Africa to have regime change isn't actually the fault of the ANC. I know lots of people want to say, well, it's the fault of the ANC voter. The ANC voter only ever wants to vote for the ANC guy. It's not true. The fault of the South African electorate, the reason we don't have regime change is the fault of the opposition to show that they're a viable alternative. That key word being alternative, not replacement, not we're better management. That's all it is. You get a more competent manager to do what we always did. And to a large degree, that's the way the DA presents itself.
I think I would disagree with everything you said. Completely and utterly disagree. Notably because MK Party exists and they're getting 10% of the vote nationally. We already know what MK is about. It's mainly large graft and corruption and all sorts of things. And yeah, they're getting 10% of the vote. So it's not about creating the better alternative. It's, well, South African voters are not that great at making good decisions, which is why democracy is a mistake in this place. So to me, the DA is trying its best. It is a Lib party. We must never forget that. It is a party that does govern relatively well in some aspects, in some places in this particular country. This manifesto exemplifies what they are about. I think if they did gain power, the South Africa would be better, just solely based on the fact that it wouldn't be the ANC, so there would be more investment and just things like that, just purely based on sentiment. But the problem with liberalism is like it's not radical enough to fundamentally change a country. And I think the DA exemplifies that completely. So I'm not completely saying the DA is someone that you can never vote for. I think you should potentially vote for them if you choose to. I just know that their shortcomings are inherent within the ideology of the party. And the shortcomings are that, let's face it, a lot of voters in this country are retarded. And that's fine. And that's not the DA's fault.